Now as we think about Web 3.0, which is the semantic web, a machine-readable web that AI can interact with, that machines can interact with, something that's always been missing from the internet is the understanding of what data is and how data relates to each other.
Erick Pinos, the MIT graduate and the New Jersey native, has been coding and building things in his youth long before the creation of Bitcoin. It was the 2014 MIT Bitcoin Airdrop that spurred him to pioneer the MIT Bitcoin Club and to become the president of the Blockchain Education Network. Today, he is the America's ecosystem lead for one of the largest blockchain companies in the world, and he tells us how he did it all on today's episode. Welcome to the DYOR Crypto Founders Report, where we speak to the leaders, pioneers, and inventors of the blockchain and crypto space. I'm Mustafa, the founder of DYOR Crypto, and if you're looking for a guide to help you navigate and research the world of crypto and blockchain, then you've come to the right place. Follow now on YouTube, Twitter, and dyor-crypto.com so you don't miss any of the fascinating guests that come on our show. Welcome back, everybody, to the DYOR Crypto Founders Report. Today, our guest is MIT graduate Erick Pinos. He is the former president of the MIT Bitcoin Club. He is the president of the Blockchain Education Network, and he's the America's ecosystem lead for Ontology, one of the largest blockchain companies in the world. And I am pleased to have him here. Welcome.
Thanks, Mustafa, for having me. Very excited to be here.
Tell us the story of your professional career so far, especially what you did during college.
Sure. So I went to MIT. I was an undergraduate there. My journey into Bitcoin really started in 2014 during the MIT Bitcoin Airdrop. So that was an initiative by these two students to airdrop $100 worth of Bitcoin to every student at the time. I was a sophomore, and I received part of the airdrop as well. $100 worth of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was $200, so every student got half a Bitcoin. And most of the students sold off their Bitcoin right away, but some of us held on to it. We wanted to experiment with it, try to do things with it, use it to pay for goods and services on campus. The school store accepted it, some restaurants accepted it. And I was thinking about Bitcoin payment technology, Bitcoin payment apps, how can we get more adoption for that? I didn't really see too much there, so I kind of was more focused at the time working on virtual reality. So I worked with a couple of MIT alumni companies that were based in China to do VR experiences for urban planners and for architects. So that kind of took up most of my time. But when I really came back into blockchain was in 2017, when there was when I found out about Ethereum and smart contracts. Because for me, that really changed everything, because now you can deploy applications entirely decentralized. So I was really excited about that prospect. So early 2016, late 2016, I began putting all of my money into Bitcoin and Ethereum. But 2017, I transitioned into being a coder at Hack MIT. So I was already a coder for other stuff, but this was the first time I deployed my own dApp. It was at the Hack MIT hackathon. And there I met some people from Consensus because they were sponsoring the Hack MIT there for the blockchain prize. So our team won the blockchain prize and we got free tickets to Ethereal. So when I got to go to Ethereal in Brooklyn, that also accelerated a lot of things for me, being thrown into the community, meeting the other blockchain people in person, because up to that point, everybody that I knew in the blockchain space was from Reddit or from other people at the club. So I had joined the MIT Bitcoin Club and got involved also through there, got to meet the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, which is a research group at MIT. So I got an internship there working with them. And then for the club itself, I became the president of the club to kind of help bring in more students and to host these events. And that opportunity, that was 2017, 2018, which was my senior year. And so that was a very important opportunity to bring in new speakers. So I got to meet a lot of people in the space by inviting them to come and speak. And then we hosted the MIT Bitcoin Expo in spring of 2018, which was right at the peak of the bull market. So normally that expo is 15 to 20, 30, 40 students. This time we had 900 attendees at the expo just because of the craziness of it. So it was definitely a big operation to do. But after that I graduated. I joined I joined an investment firm called Game Theory Group, where I was doing a lot of research and technical due diligence for a lot of our ICO and crypto investments. Then after that, I got plugged in with Ontology Network, which is a Asian-based blockchain project as well. So they're a high-performance public blockchain that specializes in decentralized identity and data. So that's kind of what I focus on now full-time. But also I still work with the MIT Bitcoin Club through the Blockchain Education Network, which is actually a coalition of blockchain clubs around the world. And so that started in 2014. I got involved through the MIT Bitcoin Club, but I became the president of that network. So now I work with the blockchain clubs like all over the world. And I've been doing that since 2017, 2018.
So you actually were one of the original Bitcoin pioneers back in 2014, and you got it as an airdrop. I find that very, very interesting. So what was your first thought, when did you actually first hear about Bitcoin?
That was the summer of 2013. I had an internship at Boston City Hall. I was working on urban planning for the city of Boston. And I remember like during hours when I should have been working, I was just scrolling through Bitcoin articles. I distinctly remember trying to like reading these articles, like what is Bitcoin? Why is it different than PayPal or Venmo or Swift or any other like payments technologies, right? Like what really made it different and stand out? And then it just so happened that that fall, after that summer internship was when that airdrop happened. So it was like, oh, wow, this thing I've been reading about all the summer, now some of it just got dropped into my hands and everybody else's hands on campus. I think there was like an initial like wave of excitement all around Boston for that.
Interesting. And so why were you what about it was interesting to you?
I like the decentralized nature of it. The programmability of it was what really excited me. So I was always very big on automation and integrations between different applications. So I'm a big like hobbyist working with Arduinos, working with Raspberry Pis. I really like working with IFTT or if this, then that, and then Zapier to like do integrations between like Twitter, integrations between Gmail, Calendar. And when Bitcoin and Ethereum came along, that added a whole new level of automations and programmability, right? Like you can integrate finance into your application. So like you can automate the distribution of funds. So like, oh, I have a payment that gets split 10 ways, or I collect payments from 10 different people and put it into one, set timed payments over time, right? Like the flexibility of integrating all that stuff into your hacks and into your projects was way more than you can get with like a PayPal API or like a Stripe or a Venmo API. So that was the part that excited me the most as a programmer.
And so when did you actually get into programming and computer science?
Well, programming and computer science, I was interested in for a long time. I think way back even in elementary school, I made like my first website. And that was like a drag and drop. So it wasn't like a heavy coder thing. But in middle school, I started making games through some programs that were there. And then in high school, I learned how to code in Swift. And so that was when I made like an iOS app, right? So like getting exposure that way. So it was always very like web development, app development, game development. And I think that just kind of like naturally pushed me into that direction of wanting to know more coding.
Yeah. And so eventually you ended up going to MIT. Why did you choose MIT? Was it your interest in computer science, or was it something else?
Yeah, my interest in it was my interest in computer science. I was really excited by MIT and all the alumni that have come out of it. Like Iron Man. It's just that's actually how I found out of it was through the movie and through Iron Man. It was like, oh wow, this is interesting. That's where he went to school. Let me look it up. And it was actually really exciting to see the inventions that had come out of it and the relation that it already had to my life. Like for example, when I was a kid, I had the Lego Mindstorms, which is like, it's a Lego set, but it has a programmable block that you can, use software to basically create robots out of Legos. And so that was actually invented at the MIT Media Lab. And so I found out about that. And the same thing with Scratch, which I had used, which is like a drag and drop code editor. Same thing with the Makey, which is a circuit board that you can like plug into household objects and turn them into keyboards through the conductivity of those things. So like you could connect it to bananas, and then you could use bananas as a keyboard. So like these really crazy, like, fun, like toys. To me, they were just toys that I liked playing with as a kid. And it turns out that they were all made at MIT. And so, really seeing that, like, oh, wow, like, okay, this place really thinks differently. Like it wasn't just going to a university. It was really being a part of of like a research group, being part of a community that thought very differently and had different aspirations for the world and saw the world through a very different lens. So for me, it was much more like I wanted to go there just to be there, as opposed to like, oh, I have to go to a college, so let me pick a college. MIT was the only school that I applied to, and I was able to get it. And so that was it was a very intense like period for me to like do all that, the whole application process and the SATs and taking them again and again to try to get the score high enough, right? And then also my grades and the recommendation letter, the essays, everything. It was a whole extra class in itself, just like that application.
Yeah. Where do you think your academic aspirations actually came from?
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, as a kid, I always really liked building things and working on things, like making my own websites, designing my own video games. I even made like my own card game, like a trading card game. Just like I enjoy the aspect of creating, right, and like making. And then when I found out about like the hobbyist community and the maker culture, right, like the maker fairs, the STEM fairs, I didn't really know about that until like I hit high school. But then I realized that, like, oh wow, okay, this is a thing, right? There's like a whole subculture around this about people like creating and making things. So that was exciting for me to see. And yeah, I think over time it was just like constantly like challenging myself. It's like, oh, can I make a card game? Can I make a video game? Can I write a book? Can I make a website? Right? Can I make a web app? Can I do a startup? During MIT, I kind of really got into entrepreneurship, and so I joined the entrepreneurship clubs. I joined the MIT 100K competition. I was one of the organizers, like to help make that competition happen. So that was really cool seeing like at a startup level, like what that ecosystem looked like.
So you made the transition to entrepreneurship. I know you got a degree in management leadership. So why did you go in the entrepreneurship path?
Yeah, so I started as a computer science student. So I was doing a course 6 undergrad, which is computer science, electrical engineering, computer science. I switched to management about halfway through after the introductory CS classes, because for me, I think it was a really interesting opportunity at MIT that the way that the business school works is that if you take business classes as an undergrad, they put you in the classes with the MBA students for the most part. There's some like undergrad specific classes, but for the most part, you get to just select from the MBA platter of classes and like make that your undergrad degree. So for me, the idea was very exciting. It's like doing all the classes with the MBA students, essentially getting an MBA, but as an undergrad with 2 years of computer science as like the beginner part. And then the second 2 years being like basically being an MBA student. That was really exciting for me because I wanted to get both worlds and I wanted to see both worlds as quickly as possible. And making a lot of friends at the MBA school definitely like put my mindset in like a much more startup-y, like, mid-career management. Like what are people that are halfway through their careers and coming back already to take, that's why people go and get their MBAs, right? Partly for the courses, but for the most part, it's for the community, the other people that are coming back at that period of their lives. So for me to be exposed to that at like such an early period of my life, that was definitely something that I wanted to do more of. And so that's why I switched majors so that I can be more of a part of that community.
Yeah, I think one thing you and I have in common is the entrepreneurship thing. Um, I've always wanted to learn how to code. What would you say is the best way to teach yourself coding, and how should someone get started if they want to?
Well, I really like Codecademy. That's what I used. Code, and it's actually, it's funny that it's like Codecademy. I always thought it was Code Academy. And so I would always like refer people to the wrong place because it's actually Codecademy. But yeah, I like that because of the interactability. I think now they're more focused on projects too, which I think is a big thing. I think it's important to have a project that you want to do in mind. Like I would always, oh, I should learn how to code. So I would get the book and then get through chapter 1. It's like variables. It's like chapter 2, and it's like addition, subtraction. And chapter 3 is all right, I'm bored. Like this is, you never get through it. But if you have a project in mind, like I want to make an app, I want to make a game, I want to make a website, then it's much easier to just start and just try it. And then when you get stuck, then you look up like, oh, I need to make a login portal. I don't even know how to do that. Then you look it up and then you start learning how to do the things that you need to do for this particular application. And for me, that when I took that approach, that accelerated my learning. And I learned way much more in just like a short couple of months than I learned in like the years of like taking like coding classes.
Yeah, someone told me in a previous interview uh, that's how they learned how to do it. Was they went to hackathons, and the actual application process is how they learned it. So I think you're onto something there. Um, so what happened after you graduated?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I got involved with Game Theory Group, as mentioned, and so that was really exciting because the two guys that ran it, they were already like mid career, but they were also very young, right? So they had already like exited their first startups, and they were getting into the crypto space. So kind of similar to the idea of like why I wanted to be a part of the Sloan School, of the MBA school, is like I wanted to put myself I wanted to be on the same team with the people that I saw as like the farthest ahead, you know, and that I had the most potential to learn from. Like I think the idea of like doing a startup with my peers was exciting at the time. And I kind of did that for a bit, but it was like, okay, we're all figuring out, we're all lost in the void together, which is fun. But I also want to be growing, not just through like the challenges of the unknown, but also through like working with mentor figures, people that can be like mentors and kind of have more experience than I do, so that I can learn from them as well. So I was really thankful and grateful for that opportunity to be able to work with Game Theory Group. And then what I brought to the table was like technical due diligence, because I was the technical person on the team. So through that, I also got exposure through the ICO investments. I got exposure to a lot of different crypto projects. And that's actually how I found out about Ontology, where I am now, because Game Theory Group was very focused on Asian blockchain investments, which for me, that was also a new world for me, because you know I had the US, and I met most of the US blockchain community through Ethereal, through Consensus New York, through the North American Bitcoin Conference. And then I also got to meet a lot of the Latin American blockchain community, because I am Latin American. So whenever I would go back home, I would find like, my home is in Costa Rica, right? So every time I would go back home, I'd like find local meetup groups, and then I found out about the Latin American blockchain ecosystem that way. But the Asian blockchain ecosystem was like a whole nother world. And so through Game Theory Group, I was able to meet a lot of players in that ecosystem. And then, you know, then I met Ontology. And then so when it came time to, this was 2019, when it came time to me wanting to switch, like, okay, I want to do less like work on investment now. I want to work on product. That was the project that I wanted to work on, because they were doing decentralized identity, which I think to me was a very exciting idea, because I was very new at the time.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that actually today. Um, what was the most difficult part about this whole chapter of your life, from graduating high school, going through MIT, and getting into your roles with a Game Theory Group and etc.? What would you say is the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
So for me, I think, well, definitely the biggest challenge was not failing, because the classes are very hard. And it was a lot about balance, right? Like the balance between the classes and the extracurriculars, or like, you know, what you're actually doing for work. So for me, I hit a point where I was spending like, you know, tons and tons of hours on like homework assignments or like studying for quizzes. And it's like, you know, like why am I sitting here? Like, I already, like, meanwhile, I have like an internship, right? Like at a company, or I'm working under a professor, like on a research project. So I'm like, why am I sitting here studying for so long, for so hard, just to try to get like an A on an exam, to get a good grade, to get a good job, when I already have the job that good grade would like enable for me, right? Like I got my way, you know, more from going to events and meeting people and meeting, you know, and then getting my opportunities that way. Like even, so I interned at NASDAQ for a bit on the blockchain team. And the way that I got that was through going to a dinner hosted by the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, where the head of the blockchain program at NASDAQ was at. So I got to meet him that way. And so for me, the value of going to that dinner, you know, exceeded the value of like staying home to get a couple of extra hours of work in, right? So that I would get a B instead of a C, or an A instead of a B. So I think there was like, it's kind of like a diminishing, it was like the law of like diminishing returns. with regards to grades. And I understand that it closes some doors for me. Like if I, graduated with C's, then grad school wouldn't be an option because it's like the grades are too low. But that's okay for me because I don't really like school. And so, respect to everyone that can get a grad degree, but that's not like my path. So I kind of understand like those doors are closed for me. But, path that I've chosen is like going into industry, talking to people, getting my jobs and my opportunities through the connections that I know, and always prioritizing being able to meet up with people and going to a community and being a part of all these different groups. Which, yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, like they did it the other way. Like they just studied as hard as they can. They got the A's and then their resume stands out. They apply to Google and then they get it. And they get hired right away. I applied to Google like all 4 years that I was there. I applied to Microsoft like all 4 years. I didn't get anything because it was all like, it's just like, oh, just send us your grades. That's it. It's like no spot for like resume, no place to explain, well, I didn't get an A because instead of going to, I missed all these classes because I flew to the North American Bitcoin conference in Miami on my own ticket and I slept on like 3 chairs put together because I was like, I need to be at this conference and network. There's no spot for that. It's just, you get an A or is it a B or is it a C, right? So yeah, I don't really like that. But for the people that it works for really well because they can get to the top. For me, it's always been a game of networking and who do you know and what value can you provide for them and what kinds of things can you do together.
Thank you for sharing that. So you, Erick, you were the president of the MIT Bitcoin Club, and also you're currently the president of the Blockchain Education Network. Can you tell us a little bit about those two organizations and what was it like being the president?
Yeah, so the MIT Bitcoin Club was an undergraduate and grad student club, at MIT initially around Bitcoin, but after Ethereum came out, then it kind of was more, blockchain in general, but with a heavy focus on Bitcoin because a lot of Bitcoin development happened at MIT. Some Bitcoin core developers were there. The MIT Digital Currency Initiative was like founded very early on, so it was very involved heavily in like a lot of the initial research on Lightning Network, a lot of the research on the core wallet. And so just, it being a lot of history, a lot of legacy there. And the Blockchain Education Network had started as a coalition of different blockchain clubs. So the MIT Bitcoin Club, Stanford Bitcoin Group, and the University of Michigan Bitcoin Club, they kind of came together and was like, hey, Bitcoin's very new, right? 2014, not a lot of education online. The universities don't even like us. They want to shut us down because they're like, Bitcoin is like legal stuff, right? Drug stuff. So we need to like come together and like have a Facebook group and have a Google Drive so we can share documents, share lessons, share material and resources and opportunities. And then from there, more and more clubs joined the network. So like the Berkeley Bitcoin Association, which became Blockchain at Berkeley, University of Miami. We have universities in other countries that joined, universities in Italy, universities in Puerto Rico, universities in Latin America, and in Europe and in Canada. A lot of clubs in Canada early on too, which is really interesting. And so, the network self-organized into like, okay, we need like a president, we need like a vice president, an executive director, people for marketing, people for events. And so it just grew that way. Fast forward to today, we have like thousands of students in the network. We have over 100 different blockchain clubs. Over the years, the clubs have like come and gone. Like they shut down because the school shuts them down because they don't want like Bitcoin being taught. That's not so much a problem anymore, but it happened to a lot of like our earliest clubs, or the students graduate and they kind of lose interest. But we've been able to, as the Blockchain Education Network, kind of really grow and evolve. We work with a lot of faculty now and with a lot of professors now. And so that helps with the longevity and ensuring that there's always someone at the school that's like constantly evangelizing about blockchain and bringing in new people into the network. But basically, we have a lot of content and courses that's created by students and created by professors for other students. And so the students come and they complete the courses, they complete the material. We host events online and offline, across all the different clubs, but also online intercollegiately. We try to do a lot of intercollegiate activities. And then we have rewards for the students that complete the most courses and participate the most. So one of the most exciting things has always been that Blockchain Education Network pays for flights and Airbnbs for some conferences, gives that out as rewards. So when I was a student, the way that I transitioned from like the MIT, just being a part of the MIT Bitcoin Club, getting to know the rest of the network was when in 2018 in January for the North American Bitcoin Conference, the Blockchain Education Network had an Airbnb at the conference. So I got to go down as the president of the MIT Bitcoin Club and meet the other presidents of the other blockchain clubs there at an Airbnb, right, sponsored by Ben. And so Ben is short for Blockchain Education Network. And so that changed my mind, and seeing like basically like parallel versions of me at other universities. That's what made me want to become an organizer of the organization, as opposed to just like someone who's participating through MIT. So then I became the director of operations of the Blockchain Education Network. And then after graduating, I became the president of the network. And that was back in 2018. So I've kind of been running Ben now for like 4 years.
And so you're still very active with that, right?
Yeah, it takes a lot of time.
So for anyone who's interested in the Blockchain Education Network, could you tell them how they could participate or check it out?
Yeah, blockchainedu.org. There's also blockchainedu on Twitter. We have a Ben Learn platform. So it's like a Coursera type platform that has like all the courses laid out. There's also groups that people can join. There's groups for students, alumni, professors, the different regions of Ben in the different countries. We also have a jobs board that through our alumni and through our partners, there's always job postings there. So it's kind of a good like growth plan. It's like you join the network, you take the courses, you go to the workshops, you participate in the hackathons. And then at the end of it, you apply to the jobs and you kind of show your credentials that you earned throughout your time at Ben to these companies. And then, we've been able to get a lot of students placed that way.
Interesting. So people who use Blockchain Education Network have opportunity to get jobs, right?
Yeah. We really want to push the idea that blockchain can be a career, right? More so than a hobby. And we definitely noticed that like in the early days, we had a lot of startups come from the network and a lot of students got jobs, but there was an overwhelming majority of students that kind of saw blockchain as just like a hobby. Oh yeah, this is fun, but now I got to get back to class, or I got to go think about my career. So we really make a concerted effort. It's like, okay, well, let's grow the jobs board. Let's do more events about getting careers or getting internships in the blockchain space. Let's think about what can we do for students that to boost their resumes through like working on projects or doing like trading simulations, right? Like how can we help students see that you don't have to, this isn't just like a side thing you do on the internet after you come home from school. This is actually something that can be your career. We did a couple of accredited classes too. So like that's a big focus. It's like, how do we get classes taught for college credit at universities? That's definitely the slowest thing because, you're working with university administrations is like a very long period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we have time, we'll come back to that a little bit. But what I wanted to do is ask you about Ontology, the company that you're working for now. So tell us about how you met them and what was sort of the progression of when you first met them to when you got the position that you're in right now.
Yeah, so I met them while I was at Game Theory Group. They came and they spoke at the Harvard Kennedy School Blockchain Club meetup, which is also, part of the Blockchain Education Network. So I got to meet up initially through that. And then through some of the VC connections that we had through Game Theory Group, I got introduced to their CEO and to their marketing team, had a call with them. They actually flew me out to Shanghai to interview with them. And so that was my first time being in Shanghai. Previously, when I was working on virtual reality for urban planner stuff, that was in Beijing. So going to Shanghai was a very different part of China for me to see. And so that was really cool. Interview with them, got the job with them. Then I just started working with them. That was in 2019. And then just was representing them. So I was the only team member that was based in the US. So for me, it was like a very remote position, which was interesting because I enjoy it for like a lot of reasons, like being able to work remote. I do enjoy the aspect of having an office. So like, that part was a little missing, but I think like, you just like make the most of it. During the pandemic, it worked really well because nothing really changed for me. Everything was remote anyways. So I got to just keep like working as much as I did and I had the job security there. But yeah, I think it just grew from there. And then the projects we got involved in, initially it was very very enterprise focused, very supply chain focused, very, for the decentralized identity. But now I think it's a lot more towards DeFi, towards Web3, right? Like all these new applications that are popping up that don't even interface necessarily with like traditional enterprises. It's just like new industries that are just coming into genesis.
That's interesting. So we're gonna talk about ontology now, but before I do that, I watched one of your speeches on YouTube about the future of the internet, and I thought that was very fascinating. So I have a couple of questions about that. What's something that you believe about the future of the internet that most other people would disagree with you on?
That most other people would disagree with. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't think I really hold too many controversial opinions. I think that, maybe that the most of the crypto community would disagree on is like, I think that the internet of the future is still going to look very similar to like how it does today, but there's a reason it evolved this way. And I think that there seems to be like, I don't know, like blinders for a lot of like crypto people that think that everybody's going to be their own bank. Everyone's going to have their own private key, right? We're all going to be using MetaMask. We're all going to be doing that. I don't think it's going to happen. Like people use username and passwords for a reason, right? And to think that everyone's going to switch now to like having a Web3 MetaMask wallet with a private key that you have a backup like written on a sheet of paper that you keep like in a drawer, or like, I think it's like too much for people. Not everyone, we don't all run our own email servers. We could, like if we really wanted the be our own bank, we could be our own email server, but that never caught on as like a mass thing. Most people use Gmail. So I think it's kind of similar with blockchain. Is how like, I think really it's about the agency that a blockchain enabled future and a blockchain powered future is definitely going to happen. And for the people that want the autonomy to have their own private keys, manage their own keys, interact with the dApps that they want to use directly with their own wallets, they can do that. So that's part of the agency. But I think that what we have to think about as entrepreneurs and as like the leaders of these companies is how do we make tools for the masses that the majority of people can benefit from? And that's going to include a level of custodianship and a level of abstracting away some of the more complexities of blockchain and giving people interfaces that they're used to, right? Like username and password stuff.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't disagree with you on that, but I believe that other people would. And I talked to Alex Mashinsky, the founder of Celsius Network, on this channel, and he said something very similar to you. He said that mass adoption is not going to happen until we build bridges. He calls them bridges, where everyday people can just use a regular app on their phone to do what they need to do. And that's what really we're the phase that we're in, is we're building these interfaces that like you said, to make it easy for people to just jump on and just use it. People don't want to have private keys and don't have to deal with all this stuff, unless you're like, people like us, kind of like insiders who we kind of geek out on that kind of stuff, right? So the Ontology white paper says, I'm going to quote something from the white paper, is Ontology is a blockchain distributed ledger network which combines a distributed identity system, distributed data exchange, distributed data collaboration, distributed procedure protocols, distributed communities, distributed attestation, and various industry-specific modules. Together, this builds an infrastructure for peer-to-peer trust network, which is cross-chain, cross-system, cross-industry, cross-application, cross-device. A mouthful, but I'm going to unpack this with you today for those who are interested in learning about ontology. First of all, digital ledger technology, distributed ledger technology, DLT. Now, I've been researching this space since 2017, so I have an idea of what this is. But for those who are new to this space, can you describe what DLT is in your own words?
Yeah, so distributed ledger technology is kind of an umbrella which blockchain falls under, because there's other kinds, right? There's Tangle technologies. There's just like a ledger that's kind of shared, kind of more of like a private blockchain, right? So like, there's different do you want me to explain like what a blockchain is in general, or just
Sure.
go? Yeah, let's see. It's actually the question that I'm like worst at explaining, which I probably should be good at since I'm president of the Blockchain Education Network.
That's why I picked this question for you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, a blockchain is like essentially is a list of transactions, like a spreadsheet. But the key is that the spreadsheet of transactions is not stored on a company server or like on a computer. It's actually copies of it are with every node in the system. So everybody in the system has their own copy of the spreadsheet. And anytime there's a new transaction, you add that to the bottom of the spreadsheet. So it's a mesh network, right? It's like a peer-to-peer network. How do you self-organize with a community of people where there's no clear leader? It's like, this is the way you do it, is you just get everybody to agree on every new transaction that happens, right? And so this is where the miners come in, is that's what the miners do, is that they validate the new transactions, and they're constantly spending electricity so that, to do this service. So, it would be wasteful to have like a bad actor do it, right? So it's kind of the premise that blockchain takes on, is that like there's people that want the good of the network because they want to earn the Bitcoin to then be able to like use it, right? So they wouldn't want to spend electricity to get Bitcoin to hack the network and crash the value of their own Bitcoin. So I think it's a really interesting thing, because it kind of flips game theory on its head, where previously like you'd only be able to act in your best interest, but now you can act both in your best interest and in the best interest of the whole network.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell us what is game theory?
Yeah, so game theory is kind of like it's like a theory about the outcomes of specific simulations. So like the example that they use is a prisoner's dilemma. So it's like, what do you do in a situation where you don't have access to all the information, and what is the best possible thing that you can do, best possible decision that you can make? So the example with the prisoner's dilemma is, say you have like two people that robbed a bank together, and they both get caught, and they can both get, they're going to get put in jail, but they get interviewed by the detective individually. And so the detective says to one person, or one of the robbers, okay, we know you did it, so confess. If you confess and rat out your other guy, we'll give you a plea bargain, so you'll get less jail time. But if you lie to us and you say you didn't do it, and the other guy, says that you did do it, like if he rats you out, then you get even more jail time and he gets less jail time. So it very much is like, like a human psychology thing. It's like, you as the robber, is the other guy going to rat you out? How much do you trust him to rat you out? If you like say you don't, then they will, and then you get more jail time. But say you don't and they don't, then you both get less jail time. So the ideal scenario for both parties is both of you like lie and don't rat each other out, and then both of you get less jail time. But how are you going to know if they're going to do it or not? Like, what are the chances? Like, what if there's even a small chance that they rat you out? Like, how much do you trust this person, right? So it's like, oh, shoot, you should just like rat them out. But then what if they don't rat you out? Now you ratted them out. Now you're the asshole. And then, you put them in jail for a longer time. So there's no way to win, because there's like that lack of communication there. So that's kind of like what blockchain fixes, is that because now you have a way of trustlessly communicating, is that everybody gets a copy of it. So there's always communication happening. And someone like, if I rat them out, I can't do that because that'll crash the whole network. So you kind of like agree to like, do what's best for each other. And then you get that reduced jail time, right? Which is a desirable outcome there. So I think it's, in blockchain, there's a lot of references to the Byzantine generals problem, or the idea behind that was that there were these generals during a time of war. And so when you like receive a letter that says like, that we need to like spread out and like go and do all these like strategies, back then they didn't have the internet, right? So back then sending a letter would take like weeks, right? Maybe even like months when you have the carrier deliver it. So how do you coordinate an army that's spread across an entire empire in a war when you don't know, like, oh shoot, is this general going to invade at this time? Should I go and help them, or should I let them do that and go invade somewhere else, right? Or go and protect somewhere else? Like that lack of communication, which would take weeks, you had to make decisions without knowing what the other person was going to do. So it's a very exciting part of blockchain, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people that are excited about like the trading and like, oh, the number go up and money go up. But I think all these like coordination problems and all these like problems in like communication and like, computer science are like just as interesting. And I think there's a big subset of people that are excited about that.
Yeah. To me, it's the challenge of grasping these concepts and like putting it all together. It's the most satisfying part about it. So let's unpack the statement about ontology. The distributed data exchange and collaboration. What's meant by this?
Distributed data exchange. So how do you like transfer data in a decentralized way? So we know blockchain, it can be, clearly is used for money, right, or value in the form of cryptocurrencies. Like, I send you one token, you send me two tokens, I send that person a token, and that's kind of like the biggest use case. But we explore a lot, can blockchain be used to transfer other kinds of data, right? Like, can you have a credential? Can you have like a diploma? Or can you have a medical record? And can you send that to someone else? And then when they get it, they know it hasn't been tampered with. Legal documents, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's still surprising that in this day and age, there's some legal documents. It's like, here, sign this. I'm like, what? Like, sign this sheet of paper with like a pen with like ink? Like, what? Just write my name on it? Like, and that's supposed to be my same. Like, I don't even sign my name the same way I can't even sign the same way more than once. Like, it looks like I'm forging myself. So like, it makes sense that this should be a system that should be done with digital signatures, that you should have the attestation on a blockchain so that you can see like, all right, this was actually signed by this person. Here's your cryptographic key. So for the decentralized data exchange, right, like we're always like exploring and pushing, like, how do you store these different kinds of data in a way that doesn't take up too much space in the blockchain, or what needs to be stored off chain, or what parts of it need to be stored on chain. Because in a lot of these systems, like in supply chains and medical records and in like, education, any kind of like record keeping, what you'll find for like blockchain-based solutions is that there's usually is like a decentralized storage solution, like IPFS, that's like at the backbone of it. And the only thing that's stored on chain itself is the attestation. This happens a lot with NFT projects, is that the images of these NFTs themselves are not actually stored on the blockchain, because that would require a lot of storage space. And the blockchain would get very, very big very quickly. But rather, the image is stored through some decentralized server or file storage system like IPFS, which I think is very integral to the whole blockchain ecosystem. And only like a piece of it is stored on the blockchain that links it to that file. So that whole framework of interconnected services and tools, trying to abstract that away into like an easy data exchange solution that applications can plug into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Distributed procedure protocols, communities, and attestation. Can you break those down? Can you define a little bit more what's meant by these words?
Yeah, so kind of building off of it, right? Like, the one thing is the data itself, like just the storage and sending and transfer of like files and records. The other thing would be like decentralizing procedures. So what people would think of, if you think of procedures and communities, really the term for it is like the rise of DAOs, so decentralized autonomous organizations. So not so much like data storage and data transfer, but more how do you organize as a community? How do you vote? How do you make decisions? How do you allocate resources? How do you come to understandings? And so this is something that DAOs have really been like tackling with and trying to work on. And now there's all these new tools and services to kind of aid with that, for voting delegation, for multi-sig wallets that can hold funds in a safe way. So how do you just basically like that's what it means. It's like, what are those procedures around that? How do we like kind of push that forward and make new tools to kind of assist in self-organizing communities?
Okay, that's very insightful. Very insightful. Thanks for giving us those examples. The word trust was repeated over 100 times in the white paper of Ontology. It's one of the quotes here is, trust is a key component in human organization and social collaboration. Trust has become the core requirement of social and economic partnership that has been built up through technology, law, and community throughout history. In your own words, if you boiled it down to its most basic component, what is trust really?
Well, I think trust is, you can make a decision in some way. You either make a decision to do something or not do something that is reliant on someone else doing something that you're not so sure if they're going to do it or not. So kind of going back to the game theory, right? So the game theory takes the assumption that the best decision is one where you don't trust anyone. So you're always going to screw someone else over, and you're always going to protect your own best interests at the expense of other people. In a trustless environment, right, it's impossible to make any decision that will help someone else unless it's the thing that's going to bring the most value to you, right? Like you're going to rat someone else out so that you can get like less time served, or you're going to maximize your own reward, and someone else might not. Like I think the jail time thing is kind of like it's not relatable for most people, but I think another example would even just be like just communication, or just like say you had like the board, like the game shows, right? Where it's like, oh, there's a pool of $100, everybody gets $100, but if someone takes $1,000, then they get all the money, right? And then nobody else gets any money. So everyone's like, no, I want the 1,000, right? Like, I don't, it'd be great if we all get 100, but if someone else takes the 1,000 and I don't, then, I'm going to take it. So the reason blockchain brings up trust so many times is because it kind of figured out a way to solve that problem, right? Because you coordinate with the technology. So you just trust the code, and that everybody else is going to leave the $100 in the pool because that's kind of like the way that the framework is built, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's the way that you get rewarded if you act in a way that benefits everyone else. So the technology itself can counter. It reduces counterparty risk essentially. So like even if you're doing like exchanges, mm-hmm. Trust comes a lot in like e-commerce. If I buy a product, how do I know that I'm actually going to get it? Mm-hmm. Even if I buy digital products, right? How do I know that I'm going to get the payment, or how do I know that I make a payment, I'm going to get the digital good? In the clearest example, right? Blockchain used for e-commerce. Like if you purchase an NFT, you're going to get the NFT because the settlement occurs on chain. The code is there. If you trade tokens, you're going to get the other token, and you actually have that token because it all exists on chain. So it just reduces so much of counterparty risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we live in a world today where we have credit card companies that kind of are protecting us against these issues, and we have banks and sort of third parties, but we're moving into a world where that third party is being removed. And so we need a system that doesn't require, we can put our full trust in it, knowing that the system, the blockchain or whatever component between us is going to operate the way we expect it to.
Practically it reduces counterparties, reduces the need for audits. Mm-hmm. So one of the projects that I worked on while I was a student at the MIT Digital Currency Initiative was on blockchain for renewable energy credits. And the reason that was very important is because, the way that renewable energy credits were currently being done was if you have a factory with solar panels, you'd have a guy come in, an auditor, and they would look how many solar panels, so do some calculations on a sheet of paper, and they'd be like, okay, yeah, you have like this many solar panels running for a month. You get like 100 credits. And then you have like two other auditors come in, cross-reference, and then you take the average of the three. And it's like, well, why is the system like this? Like, it should be the IoT in the solar panels that are minting renewable energy credits, per kilowatt hour of electricity, and then you just have those. You don't need auditors to come in because all of it was verifiable at the moment that it was created. So I think that it's capability for reducing auditors. Or same thing with like legal documents, right? When you have legal documents, you need a notary. Right? You need someone to come and notarize it and like be present as a witness for you signing it. Why? Because there's so much forgery. Like if it's just your name on a sheet of paper, anybody can make up a signature for any person and just pretend to be someone else. Mm-hmm. Blockchain removes that because you need to sign it with your key, and then it gets attestated, so you know that you actually signed it at this time. So just I think, in conceptual terms, like philosophically, blockchain is about reducing the need for trust. but practically it's reducing auditors, reducing the need for notarizers, reducing the need for counterparty risk. And that's, I think, that people can think about it practically if the idea of like trustlessness is like too abstract.
Reducing the need for trusted individuals within a community. It's like we can trust each other, but we don't need to in order to do business. Like we can, just the two of us, or the what's in between us is the trustless system. Let's talk about decentralized identity verification. So what is decentralized identity?
So decentralized identity is giving an identity, like an account, like a user account, to it could be to individuals, it could be to companies, it can even be to objects. It's like a unique identifier. So just like you have an address in crypto, right? You have like an address and a private key. So similarly, for a decentralized identity, you would also have an address and a private key, but that address is more for you and for credentialing and for certificates than it is for like cryptocurrencies and transactions. So if you have a diploma, or like a degree or a medical record, or even just like a legal document, that address would be your unique identifier. Because your name, multiple people can have your name, multiple people can have your birthday. Exposing those things is also like a big like security risk. So like that shouldn't be your identifier. Your identifier should be like a long string of characters that's unique to you, and you have the private key that can sign things with that address. And then that address, right, can have the metadata. So the whole decentralized identity, they're stored in DIDs, which are decentralized identifiers. So that's like a credential that has all this metadata that you can choose to add about yourself. So like there you can have like your legal name, you can have your address, or you can have your medical records, like anything that's like associated with it. The other component is the verifiable credentials. So those are the actual certificates. So those are the files that are like, this is my diploma, this is my medical record, this is my KYC credential, right? Like this is my, my legal document between me and like this lawyer. So those two systems, those two like types of data files work together to create like what someone would have as their decentralized identity.
So what's wrong with the traditional centralized systems of identity that we have now? Social security system, state ID system, passport system. What's wrong with these systems that we have now that we need decentralized identity systems?
So one is like one is that a lot of these systems weren't designed to be used as identities. So the Social Security system was initially created just to manage Social Security, right? Like people paying in, and then when you get old, you have a way of taking that money back out. But that number kind of became like the number that now everybody wants to know, right? So what is it? Is it like 1, 2, 3, 4? It's like
eight characters.
Like eight character number. And it's easily guessable, right? Like the first three I think is an area code. The second two just go up in number, like randomly, and the last four is just the order in which you were born in. So whatever your social security number is, if you go one up, that's the baby born in the hospital next to you, which is like, or the hospital, it's the baby born after you at the same hospital. I think they might have changed it now, but for a long time, that's what it was. So like, the social security number of like anybody born after you, anyone born before you at the same hospital. So like, it's a really, really bad system to use. It's also
I was actually completely under the impression that it was an identity system, but I completely neglected the fact that it's actually used to manage Social Security. I guess I don't really think about Social Security as much because of the sort of economic issues we're having in America with regards to Social Security. But what you're saying definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I have my thoughts about the Social Security system, as a system, but I think like the Social Security number as a method of identification is, a very laughably bad. It is not a very good system. As soon as that number is out there, this is why identity theft happens a lot. Identity theft happens because Social Security numbers are 8 characters long, because a legal document with just like your signature that's like written on a sheet of paper is like an acceptable form of proof. People are like, to change your phone number, you call in and then you sound with your voice, and then it's like, oh, answer the security question. What's your mother's maiden name? So once she's on Facebook, she has her maiden name on Facebook. So like, boom, that's it. You just hacked someone. So I think like we need a decentralized identity system because we need like a stronger, more robust way for people to manage their identities, reduce on the amount of like identity fraud that's happening. That's on one side, right? Is we're just pure like damage control for like all the identity fraud that's going on. On the other side is more like the idea that people should have their own identities, because right now it's kind of determined for them and it's very locked within different applications. Which if you go to Facebook, you have your Facebook profile. You go to Google, you have your Google profile. If you go to the DMV, right, like you have your driver's license and your passport. So right now, your identity is kind of stored in these applications. Whereas this new system, a decentralized identity system, would be more, you have your identity and you go and take it to each application. And then you choose what data to share with each application. So kind of like single sign-on, kind of like how Facebook does it, where you go and log in with Facebook in the different apps instead of creating a new account for every new application. But something like that should not be something that's owned by Facebook or controlled by one company. That should be something that's owned by the user. And the only way to really ensure that something's owned by the user without any company like owning it is by putting it on a blockchain, right? By doing it in a decentralized way.
Yeah, the amount of scams and attempts to hack information, it's I mean, I don't know how many times a day I get these like random text messages like, click here, your accounts, somebody requested to change your password, click here to change your password. And I'm like, this is pathetic. Like, somebody needs to do something about this, because there are people out there every day that are having their identity stolen. And it's basically a way to wipe somebody out. And I think that this decentralized identity system, personally, I think it's probably the most important initiative, and probably one of the more easier initiatives to roll out, and a mass adoption type of rollout when it comes to blockchain. So really interesting, and thank you for sharing that answer with us. So you mentioned to me that one thing that you're really fascinated with and that you can really talk to us about is credit scores on chain, DeFi lending, NFT lending. These are all like brand new concepts in finance, because now you can go get a loan without needing a bank, right? Can you tell us what are some of the biggest problems right now that are facing the established credit system, especially the one we have here in the United States?
So I think some of the biggest problems are around definitely around credit itself, right? And like how credit is calculated, right? There's an entire industry around helping you understand and improve your credit score, just because people have no idea what's going on, right? They don't know like what makes their credit score their credit score. Most companies, they collect all this data about you that you didn't know they had. Then they create a score about you that's important to you. It's like, and then they charge you to see it, and they don't tell you how to improve it. And then it doesn't really, it kind of works, but it also doesn't really work. And like when you think about the credit scoring system, I mean, even women in the US weren't allowed to have credit scores until like the mid 1900s. So people are like, oh yeah, it's fine, everyone has a credit score now. It's like, no, that was a very recent thing that like everyone has a credit score. So people didn't even have credit scores. So you have blocked out women from being able to have access to credit for a long time. And now, you look at other countries that are even farther behind, where it's still like a large amount of the population is unbanked. So how do you give access to people, give them access to these financial services without needing to use all of the traditional infrastructure, because that could take a long time to catch up. And then with the calculation of the credit score itself, right, it is like an enigma, and it's a mystery, and it's also very archaic. Like I had to do a call to get a new phone, like on a phone plan. So I would pay like monthly, and I had to like verify my identity through my credit score. First, my credit score dropped significantly, and I didn't know why. And it was like, oh, because I bought like an expensive thing on a card, and it was the day before it was going to be reported. So then it was reported as a big purchase, and then it looked like I maxed out my credit card, even though I paid it back right after, but because it was one day after, it looked like I maxed it out. And so it dropped my credit score by like 100 points. And then it took a whole month because even though I fixed it right away, it only reports once a month. So even just the fact that like it only updates like once a month is already like, what is this? Like, why is it only updating once a month? And it's within a business day too. So like, if there's a national holiday, then it's not going to be updated. It's like, what is this system? What is it with like the world's financial system that is like, it doesn't operate on holidays, or it only operates like on Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. Like, does that sound like a world like financial infrastructure, payments infrastructure? It doesn't sound very robust. So what if the internet shut down? What if the internet only ran 9 to 5 a.m. Eastern time business hours? Like, it doesn't make sense. You need a financial infrastructure that can run 24/7, or you need like a decentralized identity infrastructure, a framework that can run 24/7. And that's something that blockchain can provide. But yeah, with credit scores, so like what we're really looking at is how do you take the concept of a credit score and apply it to crypto? So can you create a reputation score for someone based off of their lending history and their DApp history? So people that use these dApps, people that have crypto, people that use Uniswap, use Compound, use Auth, they lend and they borrow on it. Can you create a reputation around that to then give them access to better rates, right, and better deals? And so that way you kind of grow that ecosystem. Because I think one of the shortcomings of DeFi right now is that everything is very over collateralized. So that's good from a risk perspective, it's like very low risk, but it also kind of limits the people that can participate, because the only kinds of loans you can do are like loans where you have to put up collateral of an asset and then borrow against it. So I have to put up, like, if I want to borrow DAI, which is, a stable coin pegged to the value of a dollar, I'd have to like lend $100 worth of something and then borrow like $80 or $50. So it's like, well, what's the point? Because at that point you could just sell, right, and then just use that money initially. There's some use cases for that, mainly people that don't want to, they want the price exposure of the assets and they still want to borrow against it. So there's some benefits for that, but we're thinking about like microloans. We're thinking about people that want to take out loans for like real world use cases. Like, how do we kind of help enable that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. So I read in an article in the Wall Street Journal not that long ago, actually, and it said that FICO scores, the headline was FICO scores hold on the credit market is slipping. Banks are increasingly relying on their own scores. So what does the future of credit and lending look like to you?
I think it's a very decentralized system, right? I think that the credit score, would be one, it'd be more like a reputation score than a credit score, because it can take into factors that aren't just like your credit, like lending history. You look, there's a big problem now with people that you need you need a credit card to build good credit, but nobody will give you a credit card unless you have good credit. So you have like all these college graduates that don't know what to do, and you have a whole industry now of companies that are like, oh, here's like secure debit cards. Here's debit cards to help you build your credit, right? Just because like nobody knows what's going on, and you need a good credit score to get a credit card, and you need a credit card to start building your credit. So like, kind of changing that whole system up. So I think it's a lot more equitable, a lot more accessible for people to start building their reputation, building their credit, and like I said, is more reputation now, because what's happening now in a lot of DAOs is that they're rewarding people, not necessarily just on how much, financial transactions they've done, or how much like transaction flow they've used, or how much they've lent, or how much they've borrowed. But there's also a lot of people rewarding based off of like how many DAOs they participated in. Have they voted in projects before? There were a couple of airdrops that were done that got free tokens for people, and it wasn't based off of like how much money have you put into this, what's your credit score, or what's your reputation score. It was more like, well, have you participated in the discussions, have you voted, how long have you been using it, how many different wallets have been using it from, right? Like how it's really more like of a loyalty program kind of thing. So I think it's interesting, because I think we'll see more of that, kind of the blending of like the idea of like a credit score with kind of like the idea of a loyalty program. And you'll see that using it for different dApps will give you different benefits. But at the core is the fact that like the person owns it, right? It's like their data, like they own it, and they can choose which dApps can see it and what aspects of it each dApp can see.
Yeah, very interesting. I didn't know that about the reputation score within DAOs. I had no idea. It's really fascinating. What about NFT lending? What is that exactly?
So I think NFT lending is the most exciting thing out there right now. So I'm actually doing a lot of it. So first with NFTs, right? There's different kinds of NFTs. There's like art, gaming. Art is like artist mints an NFT. This is like your art piece. It could be music too. You could have music NFTs where the song file is an NFT. You could do the same thing with gaming NFTs. So gaming NFTs are like this asset in a game, this character or this item or like a sword or like an equipable, right? Like armor. It's represented as an NFT. So you have it and you can, sell it, you can mine them, you can play with them. And that in itself is a huge industry, right? Like you look at the amount of like 12-year-olds that made fortunes just selling Fortnite skins. Like it's a big market, just the virtual goods market. And then the last kind of NFT are like more like financial NFTs. So those are like promissory notes or like lending contracts, that can be represented as NFTs as well. The credentials, badges, unlockable. So like if you hold this NFT in your wallet, you get access to a special website. There's a lot of like celebrities that are like using NFTs in this way. But I think that, so where NFT lending comes in is that you can take those NFTs and you can collateralize them and borrow against it, like a pawn shop or like a mortgage, where if I have, and I do this with my land now, so I have a lot of like virtual land. So that's an NFT that represents land in the metaverse, like in virtual reality. You can own plots of land, kind of like Minecraft servers, which is another way that people made money for a lot of time, is they would host Minecraft servers and they would charge people rent to build on that plot of land. And everyone wanted to do it because you want to be in there because everybody is going to that server all the time. So your artwork or your creations will get seen. So now we're seeing a similar thing happen with like virtual land in the NFT worlds, like in Decentralized and Sandbox and Axie Infinity. There's a lot of demand for virtual land. And so what I do with my land is I lend it on NFT lending platforms, and you can borrow against it. So if you have an NFT that's worth $1,000, you can borrow like $500. And then if you pay it back on time, then you pay it back on time. You pay a little bit of interest. If you don't pay it back on time, then you lose that, you lose that NFT. The other person gets it. So, like a pawn shop or like a mortgage. But I think it's very exciting because it actually gives a use case and utility to a lot of NFTs that otherwise are just like things to look at. People just look at it in their wallet and it's like, oh, this is nice. But being able to like collateralize it and lend it and borrow, I think that's going to kick off like a whole new wave of like DeFi and NFT, interactions.
Yeah, this area of crypto and blockchain is really fascinating to me. Do you have any blogs or resources that you like to follow that are in that world?
Yeah, DCL blogger on Twitter, I think does a really great job of always like posting the newest things that are happening. NFTFi as a project, I think is really cool. They do NFT lending. What else? I mean, I think even DeFi publications like Bankless and the Defiant are doing a really good job of also keeping up with the NFT space. So, obviously just on Twitter, right? Like following things on Twitter. There's another org that I can't remember the name of, but I think that they were, you just search NFT on Twitter and things will pop up. There's so much happening now.
Yeah.
Even for me, it's like hard to keep up. Like, oh wow, this whole NFT thing happened. Like all the new like NFT drops, like the avatar drops. Like I got the CryptoPunks back when that was like a thing, but that was like back in 2018 when they first had like, not first, there was probably waves before that, but like there was like a wave there. But this most recent one like went over my head. I was like, oh, they're back, I guess. Okay, sure. Like, but I'm not really a fan of like avatars or art. I'm more of a fan of the gaming ones. I really focused on Axie Infinity, on Sandbox, in Decentraland. And the way to follow those projects would be just to follow their official blog, right? Follow their official Twitter, and then see what things and what updates they're posting about their games.
Yeah, I actually I don't like to talk about trading too much, but I have to brag. I mean, I bought these Axes when they were like a couple dollars, and I think I did like an 800% ROI on it recently. The Decentraland, um, the metaverse, the sandbox, these are interesting to me, and I think I may want to have another talk with you about that at some point if you're interested. So
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
for sure. I mean, we actually, so like really exciting about this. I love Decentraland. And
okay.
for me, it's like the perfect marriage of like virtual reality, which I worked on, and blockchain, which I work on now. And even with the Blockchain Education Network. So Blockchain Education Network, we actually partnered with Decentraland University,
Hmm.
and we started hosting like workshops and lectures in Decentraland, right? Like on their campus.
Hmm.
Uh, so we get students involved, they come, and we brought in like, we did a Uniswap event where it was about Uniswap meta delegates that Harvard and Berkeley started. So it was them teaching other students how to get involved in the Uniswap DAO inside Decentraland. So it was just like everything coming together. I think it's really, really exciting.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have some follow-up questions for you about that. Do you think that which metaverse do you think right now is the most promising one that if someone just was getting started that and they could only pick one metaverse to get involved with, which one would you recommend?
I think Sandbox, I think the Sandbox is the most exciting one. Reason being that, so Sandbox hasn't come out yet, which I'm always a little wary of. Like even for Decentraland, like I saw it and I had some land, right, and I had some mana, but I wasn't too into it because it wasn't out. And when something's not out, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if it'll ever come out, and when it actually comes out, is it going to be good or is it not going to be good? So when Decentraland came out with their client, right, and they actually deployed the game and the world, and now you have the world, I got a lot more confident in it because it's like, oh, I can use it now. I can see what it's going to look like and you can kind of see like how it's going to get better over time. So, it was a lot more exciting. Sandbox, even though the world isn't out yet, I'm still excited about because the game editor is. So I've already tried it, and anyone can go and try it, and you can already start building on it. And as a game developer, like in high school, like it is very similar to like how that works. So already for gamers and for game developers, it's going to be like a very good tool. And then I think in general, a metaverse with more game mechanics built in, like Sandbox, I think is going to get more traction more quickly than something like Decentraland, where it's very social focused, right? I think Decentraland's approach is very social VR, like alt space, right? Like Facebook's metaverse, where it's like talking and people getting to know each other. Sandbox is more like Minecraft. So like when you have the world, you have mini games and you have health and weapons and enemies and stats and like mechanics. So the game mechanics are a lot more natural they're more like built in Sandbox. Whereas for Decentraland, there's kind of plugins to like kind of add that functionality, right? But I think in Sandbox is a lot more native, and that's very important because I think like that is going to gain a lot more traction. Because game develop, you go to Decentraland, what are the things that you see right now the most? It's like art galleries and museums and social spaces, which is cool. I mean, I think it's like the alt space model, but I think that with Sandbox, right, you can immediately see how it's going to be like an MMO, or it's going to be like mini games or like Minecraft. So I think it's just going to be like there's going to be a lot more demand for that because people already get it. People get, addicted to games, right? So like they'll automatically want to go for it. So I think it's the most exciting thing. And then as a developer, right, like if you're more interested in games than you are in like social VR, then I think naturally people gravitate towards Sandbox for like choosing to deploy these kinds of, applications. It's also an easier way to make money off of it too, which I think is important. I think people are constantly thinking like, how do you make money off of things? And in Decentraland, there's some experiences where like you have to pay to do it. They found a lot of success with like casinos, right? Like Decentral Games, which I really like, which is like a virtual casino inside Decentraland. So that makes sense, right? Like you make a virtual casino, it's an online casino, and you make money off of the fees. In Sandbox, you can make money off of mini games. You charge access for your game. So I think it's like a much more natural monetization strategy for people that, you know, are game developers on there. I could talk about this all day. Like, I love Sandbox and I love Decentralized. I love all the metaverse.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much you were into it, and had I known, I would have come up with some more questions for you on that. But my immediate questions, well, first of all, let me make sure I understand what you just said. So there's a distinction, and that distinction is that the two kinds of metaverses are social and gaming. And you think that the gaming has a lot more potential in it for certain reasons. That people are really into, addicted to gaming, which actually does kind of make sense because when the market was down and things didn't look good, uh, the first thing that started looking good actually was gaming and even some art, right? But so that theory that people say that even when things are bad, gaming will still be good because people will kind of go inside and play games rather than try to go out into the world. That makes sense to me. What do you think about that? What do you think are the reasons why gaming is going to be have more potential than just a standard, old metaverse like the Facebook one or the Decentraland?
Sorry, my computer got stuck. But
Yeah,
I heard the question. I'll answer the question.
yeah, go ahead.
Um, yeah, so I think that, when a lot of people see when they think of the metaverse, or even when you try it out for a bit, it's very, say a social one, like social metaverse, like Decentraland or Altspace, from Facebook. There's it coasts a lot on the novelty, right? Because like you could talk to someone, it's exciting. You're like, oh wow, like this person, it's our avatars talking to each other and it's our voice, and we're in a nice room. Maybe there's something playing on a projector screen, or there's like a microphone interactable that you can like project your voice. So it's cool and exciting. It's unproven though, right? Because I think what happens a lot of times, people do that and they do that for a couple of times. And then eventually you're just like, oh, we'll do all our meetings like this. But then after a while, you just default back to Zoom, because what matters when you're meeting is really more like function. Like, I actually can see your screen. There's as little lag as possible. It's easier because it's supported on mobile. Like, I just need to talk to you about something, right? I'll just do a phone call. So for social aspects, it hasn't been really proven out for like a day-to-day use. It works for like some events, like if you're throwing like a conference or throwing like like a party, like it's kind of fun to do it in a social metaverse. It's like something new. And especially during the pandemic, there was a lot of that, right? Everyone's at home, and everyone's getting bored of Zoom. So you want to try new experiences. Like, oh, let me try the metaverse. Let me try a Decentraland event. Let me try, something that have something very different. But I think gaming is a lot more proven out that people do that. Even when you can go outside, people will go and stay. Even when you can go outside, people will stay inside and play games, right? So it just adds a new level on top of like communication that makes a lot of sense and is already well proven out. So I'm still excited by the idea of like social VR and what Decentraland can do with it, and what other projects. I think like Crypto Voxels and Somnium Space are also very like social VR focused. But I think that as I said, like if the metaverse has a gaming element to it or game mechanics, it's going to be a lot more attractive and in demand, and people are going to like, even Axie Infinity, right? Like, that's a metaverse. So they have land as well, and then the game itself are like, people play the game whether it's going up or down, right? Like, whether the market's up or whether the market's down, people will come and play the game. And you can tell that like this is kind of the direction that everyone's going in, because like even Decentraland is introducing more and more game-like mechanics. So it's pretty clear that like this is kind of where the industry is moving towards.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you a couple questions about academia. What fascinating things do you see specifically happening right now in terms of blockchain technology inside academia?
I think Well, blockchain technology, you mean like blockchain technology used in like ed tech, or like, just how
Uh,
is responding to
More
blockchain?
specifically about
Yeah.
research and development.
Okay. Well, I think that that's definitely very exciting, and people are a lot more open to it now than they were before, right? As mentioned, a lot of our earliest clubs in Ben got shut down with letters from the dean often that would say, like, this Bitcoin is drug money. Like, what are you doing running a drug club? Like, shutting it down. Now it's very different. Now schools want blockchain education taught. They want classes, they want research groups. A lot more PhD students and grad students are choosing to base their thesis papers on blockchain related topics. So, from an adoption perspective, there's a lot more like, it's a lot more friendly towards blockchain, like a lot of these university campuses. And then in terms of like the knowledge, right, the output is much greater in terms of blockchain research and the thought that's being given to a lot of these blockchain principles. Like, I've met grad students through the Blockchain Education Network that are working on thesis papers for all sorts of things, from like the NFT markets to people moving to Puerto Rico and like Act 60, and the pros and cons of Act 60 for blockchain, cryptocurrency tax purposes, even to like, how can crypto be used for aid and relief for like other countries, and cryptocurrency, the state of cryptocurrency in Colombia, like the country, right? So like, there's so many like interesting things, problems that are being thought more of now, from PhD students and grad students in academia, because academia is like a lot more open to blockchain now than they were before. So I think it's, it's almost like a period of like renaissance, right? Like, where we're going to have like all these, like, we have a lot more people coming into this space, and a lot more people that come from different skills and different backgrounds and have been thinking about the problem for a lot longer, right? And for like, with a lot more concerted effort, right? Like, it's one thing to go on Twitter and like be a part of the crypto space and like write some tweets and like say like, oh, this is my opinion on like, on crypto economics, right? It's another thing to have your entire thesis paper based off of this. Like, you've put a lot of thought into it and have backed it up with research. So like, I think that the word that comes out of like what these papers say is something that we should really like make sure that we learn from and like, incorporate into like our decision making. Like, the industry people should be incorporating what these researchers are saying.
Hmm. Are there any particular researchers or individuals that um, that you respect and look up to, that are currently, you know, uh, sort of showing their work?
I always really like the researchers from the Digital Currency Initiative, right? That's at MIT. That's where I worked. DCI.mit.edu. There's always like great projects coming out of there. There's a lot of research in crypto economics, a lot of research in securities and like, enforcement and like KYC, AML research. Like I said, ours was on renewable energy credits and solar financing, like microfinancing, on the blockchain or using blockchain. So that's always a good place to start. And then Blockchain at Berkeley also has like really good research. I've been really impressed by the research that they've done and the consulting that they've done for projects. And they're also, like MIT, they're really good about publishing it and making the results public for people to come and like read.
Hmm. I'll definitely check that out. And so I have a few more questions for you here, about entrepreneurship, because that was something you really specialized in, throughout your career. So, what does leadership mean to you?
That's a good question. I think, well, leadership, very, very, very traditional. Like, I don't really like ascribe to the idea of like being a thought leader or anything like that. I think like leadership is like a very concrete thing that you have to do, with your team or in your company. You have a team of people, right? And these people all have like conflicting desires, conflicting goals. Some of them want to stay long term, some of them want to leave short term. There might be like team conflicts, or there might be situations, or people have like, this is all sorts of things that could be happening. Everybody wants something different. So I think like a really important thing about being a leader is being able to manage all of that, balance all of that, while still pushing everyone towards a goal, whatever the goal is. And so the ability to do that, which can be natural, can be learned, but it definitely has to be practiced, right? And so I think that that's definitely what I would ascribe to being a leader.
Mm-hmm. And what's your personal definition of entrepreneurship?
Okay, so personal definition of entrepreneurship. Well, I would say, yeah, I mean, it's like starting a company, but not necessarily starting a company. It could be like starting a project, because I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurship happening. So a lot of companies are embracing this model where you give people a lot more autonomy. And so, if you start an initiative, then you're an entrepreneur because you've created this initiative. To say that it has to be a LLC or a C Corp, say it has to be a company is like, well, what does that mean? Because a company can be an LLC. Is it a C Corp? What do you mean by a company? Right. So like really it's when you start an initiative. You can start a nonprofit and be an entrepreneur. You can start a group and be an entrepreneur because you started the group. So the incorporation of the thing doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a company. You can even be within a company. I think there's a lot of people that kind of take a leadership role within their own company. They start an initiative within the company. And then in many ways, it's even better than starting something from scratch. I have a lot of people that I know that would refuse to take a job because of the idea they want to be an entrepreneur. No, I have to start my own thing. I have to eat ramen noodles and like live on a couch for years because I have to do. It's like, dude, just take the job, and then in the job, use your entrepreneurial skills that you learned to create your own role. And now you can focus on impact. You don't have to worry about, income. You can just focus on impact, and then using the company's resources to maximize the impact. I would consider that person like an entrepreneur, because you're hustling and you're entrepreneuring your way through the thing. It doesn't have to be like you have to start your own company and you have to have nothing beforehand.
I see. It's an interesting look on it that I haven't thought about. Who are your top 3 dead or alive entrepreneurial role models that you look up to and respect the most?
Oh, that's a good question. So I look at it more as like companies and like the companies and the company culture. I think it's like definitely a team effort. I was really like awakened when I read this. A lot of the entrepreneurship books that kind of talk about the myth of the founder, the myth of the sole founder. It's like oftentimes people like to simplify it to like, oh, this is the founder is the one that did everything. It's very rarely the case, right? It's like it's a whole team of people that had to work together and do it. The founder plays a very important role. The CEO plays a very important role, but the team as a whole have to make the vision happen. But in terms of companies, like I really like Netflix, because I think that the way that Netflix has been able to pivot and constantly remain relevant, and the foresight that they had to have, they made multiple pivots. The first pivot being, well, first, the initial business model was already innovative. It's like mail order DVDs. We can undercut, video stores by just mailing it directly to your house. You mail it back, make it as easy as possible. Then they saw the first pivot when it needed to happen, switch to streaming. So you just get things streamed, and you really needed, the internet wasn't ready for that back then, but then when it became ready, now people had enough capabilities to stream, they hopped on it. And then the next innovation was we need our own intellectual property. We need our own in-house brands, because these other companies are going to start their own video streaming services, and they're going to pull out of all of the contracts we have with them, which we saw happen right with Disney Plus. As soon as Disney Plus came out, Disney pulled all the Disney stuff from Netflix. And as soon as, now there's Paramount Pictures, now there's HBO Max. It's like everybody's pulling their content out of Netflix. So Netflix is like, okay, we need our own. And this was before these companies had their own streaming services. They had the foresight. They're like, we need our own intellectual property. Stranger Things, right? Like all the Netflix originals, like the Korean dramas. Like I think it was really, really smart. And so just like as a company, like, I think I always want to be thinking about that. It's like, oftentimes when you're like at an organization, is like, you worry about your core, and it's like, what's my core? But you also have to think like, I need to be able to pivot. And a lot of times people don't want to pivot because it's like, no, because that's too far from the mission, or, you know, we don't know if it's going to work. But it's like, you have to pivot. Like, if you have to pivot, you have to pivot. So it's like, how do you know whether you actually have to do it, or whether, you know, you just, you should just keep, which areas should you budge on, and which areas do you need to like adapt and evolve?
Hmm. Do you have any more other examples or role models that you look up to besides Netflix?
Um,
There's a lot of options out there, and you know the obvious ones are always the ones that come up first. But think about it.
yeah. Well, I don't like the obvious ones, which is interesting. Like, I don't really like Elon Musk, and I don't like Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs. Yeah,
Neither
Steve Jobs
neither
is
do
like,
I. I love
yeah,
Steve Jobs though. I gotta say I'm a big fan of Steve,
yeah.
but he was a psycho. So there is a lot of issues. He had a lot of issues.
Yeah. I guess coming from like the engineering standpoint is like, I'm always on the side of the engineers, and it's like, oh, I know how much it sucks to be yelled at by a guy who like doesn't know how to code. It just comes in and just like, I wanted to do this, and then they leave, and then you have to figure it out, you know, and then they present it so it looks like they came up with it.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a lot of that, you know, angst and anger, but no, I mean, I still respect all of those guys. I just, you know, I not as much as like a lot of people seem to do. But in terms of who I really like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like Peter Thiel.
Mm.
I think Peter Thiel, as an investor, has had a lot of foresight. And I think his book, 0 to 1, really captures this whole idea really well of like how innovative startups have to be, and the level of like radical thinking that startups have to do. Right? Like, you're starting from nothing and you're creating something new out of nothing. And the idea of like being a contrarian and like being something, you know, very, very new. Chris Dixon, who wrote this really great blog post about the next big thing will start out looking like a toy. I think that's like a very important lesson to have, right? It's like, what are we playing with now? We're all playing with Axes and NFTs. Like, it's just a toy, right? Like, it's nothing too crazy, but everything that became super big started out as a toy. Like, the internet was just like a fun little email server thing. Universities were pinging each other back and forth, like, hello, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, I really like them, and I look to like the writings that they have. Eric Ries and the lean startup model, you know, that was based out of Stanford, and at MIT we had kind of a variant of that called disciplined entrepreneurship, which is a class that I took. And I think learning about that like added a level of rigor to startups and the startup process that I think was lacking. Not that it was lacking before, but it was kind of like a trade secret. Whereas this kind of really like brought it out into the open and really turned it into a model that people can follow. And that probably saved, you know, so much time and effort, and millions of dollars raised in seed funds, you know, for people that wanted to do entrepreneurship. So, you know, I really look up to what they're doing, and I really like that. But in terms of companies, yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, I like Valve, because Valve, I think, has done a really interesting, you know, their model of like a flat hierarchy, and where people can come and suggest their own project, and then they become the project manager for their own project, because they have to pump out games, right? So they need like a very like efficient way to make high quality games and just kind of run the company. So like, I mean, it got to it is so innovative and like very like different, so radical, to the point where the handbook, the Valve employee handbook, has been like a required reading for a lot of MBA classes, right? So they make you read the handbook to understand like how Valve, the company, thinks. You know, so I really like that. I think that was interesting.
Okay. A lot of those I haven't heard of before, and so I'll definitely be checking those out. What advice would you give to young people out there who want to enter the world of business and management?
I think that if you want to enter the world of business and management, there's different kinds, right? So there's like consulting, which you'd want to work at one of the big four, in which case you need to like get an internship there, which the best way to do that would be through connections at a university. Or if you don't have that, right, just like taking the online classes and then getting into that ecosystem. That is a commonality, right, is getting into the ecosystem, going to the events, going to entrepreneurship meetups, going to consulting meetups, you know, whatever meetups there are for it. Even online now, there's a lot of stuff, because one of the one of the few upsides of the pandemic was that it kind of accelerated everyone into the idea of online meetups and like doing more online events. So it increased attendance for all of these things. And I think that that's going to stay a part of it, even as people start meeting in person again. But I think you definitely want to meet as many people and break the barriers, right? Like, it's not a good idea to just spam out LinkedIn connections. Just like, oh, let me add you to my network, right? You always have to be thinking about the value you can provide for someone else, and then how to offer that value. If it's a cold email or a cold LinkedIn is like the worst, or it's like the least best thing. But if there's no other option, you can still do that, but you have to have like a hook in the email line that's very value giving. Because I get like all of these, I get all these LinkedIn requests that are like, oh, I'd like to add you to my network. Or worse, it's like, I'd like to pick your brain on this. It's like, dude, like, I don't have time. Like, I can't. And then if you're doing startups, it's even more important to be in that mindset, because, in the startup ecosystem, VCs get pitched by startups all the time. Startup founders get asked by other startup founders questions all the time. So people are always like, there's a lot of people in a taking mentality. So being in a giving mentality already sets you apart, right? Like wanting to help other people, or like, get to know them and meeting them at events. So I think especially in business and management, it's definitely a lot more about networking and a lot more about providing value and growing a network and building a community, more so than in other industries. So someone that wants to break into that, I think that would be the best things that you could do.
Erick, if people want to follow you online or connect with you, what would be the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Erick Pinos. That's my handle there. On LinkedIn as well. Same thing, right? That's my name there. And then, like I said, with the projects that I work on, right? Blockchain Education Network is blockchainedu.org, and Ontology is ont.io.
Erick, this has been a very enlightening and entertaining talk with you, and thank you for coming on the show.